Happy holidays, ladies and gentlemen. My name is JP Spoonmore, and we are nearing the end of our New Year's Oscar movie marathon, the series where I watch a Best Picture winner every week in chronological order, starting from the 1970s to hopefully ending up in the present day, and at the end of every decade, doing a recap video like this. And we are finally returning to the decade where I started watching films seriously and wanting to become a filmmaker. The decade that held up surprisingly well on Rewatch, the 2010s. Let's get started. I think they're better when you make them yourself. Half the time I go to a bar and I order a Mule, it's too much of something, and this one's just right. So this is my Rewatch Decade. This is where I started really going to the movies in high school and at the beginning of college and thinking I knew everything. I was so confident with my knowledge of movies this decade that I would place bets with my actor buddy Jack, and he would win every time, and to this day I have yet to pick the Best Picture winner. Every year, I get it wrong. I'm gonna get it wrong this year. I just know it. This is where this all started, and it was really fun to kind of go back and rewatch all these movies. Some of them I hadn't seen before, but I think 7 out of the 10 I had. It was fun to see them after so long. In terms of like what happened this decade, I do need to have a little asterisk on the last decade. Harvey Weinstein was still in power until like 2017. He was Miramax, and then he left Miramax in like 2005 as the head, and he started his own company, the Weinstein Company, with his brother or something. They started their own company, the Weinstein Company, from 2005 until 2017 when he got caught. They were nominated for 341 awards. They won like 81. Harvey Weinstein personally was thanked 34 times in Oscar speeches. 34 people had the awards in their hand, and in the mic they said, "Thank you, Harvey Weinstein." This dude was powerful. Also, another controversy for this decade was the 2015 ceremony. So the movies in 2014 had a huge controversy that became the hashtag Oscars So White controversy that started from a tweet from a writer, like a critic, and kind of exploded from there. Every actor and movie nominated was white people, like all white people. That kind of started some reflection on inclusivity in Hollywood and whether they actually care or they actually try. And we're better for it. The Academy has brought in a lot more judges and members that are not old white guys, in the hundreds. They like really flooded the gates. It was a good, worthy change. Have we seen that change? A little bit. It's a tough look. Like, I remember that year where Creed came out and all of the wonderful people in front and behind the camera for Creed, the only person that got recognition was Stallone. I love Sylvester Stallone, but Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan were doing an amazing job, and he's the only one that got a pat on the back. Crazy stuff like that. And that wasn't even an awards movie. That was just a supporting actor stuff. So racism kind of has a weird elephant in the room feeling with every single one of these winners, because some of them are all about race, and then others are so not about it that it's like, what reality do these filmmakers exist in? It's weird. It's like really big achievements, like first time this has happened, and then a year later, it's like it never even existed. It is important to understand, especially with future Best Picture winners, they're gonna look different than the ones in the 20th century because of this. This has major implications to it, and I think all the better for it. People are gonna complain, so what? They just want another Braveheart to win, and that's not what the Academy is about anymore. It has changed because of this decade. A lesson learned the hard way is the best way to describe it. So outside of the controversies, I will say the big standout of this decade is very similar with the 2000s. What you think is a Best Picture winner, not anymore. They are doing some weird stuff this decade. There are some that are very by the books, kind of aggravating that they win, but others very unorthodox in just the way they're filmed, the way they approach similar themes, and I think we're just gonna get that from now on, especially with Oppenheimer. It's like familiar territory, but at a different angle is kind of the new way to win the award. Wow. My ice is melting fast. So, let's get into the movies. Our first movie is The King's Speech from 2010. Now, this is a very Oscar bait movie, but in a very surprising change of pace. The way it's structured and filmed is just rock solid. The camera work is wide angles. At the beginning, it feels like a YouTube video. That's how wide they're filming everything. And like close up, so there's like some distortion, like lens distortion with the people's faces and stuff. It's like the way the camera moves through the hallways and all the wallpaper, great choice of wallpapers throughout. And it's a period piece of the royal family, so everything is decadent and fancy and posh. And then the camera work is not. And I just love watching period piece dramas with wide lenses because it shrinks the characters in just these massive palaces. Like the columns take up so much space, and then the characters are, especially in this movie, framed at like the bottom of the frame. They're these tiny little things that the pressure of the royal family is just weighing down on them. And then World War II is weighing down on that. The spaces are so massive, they swallow up the characters. It's so isolating having Colin Firth just be stuck. He has all this space to run away, but he can't move. The characters are very humble and very witty. It's kind of doing what I'm assuming The Crown did on Netflix before The Crown came out. It makes the royal family look like the greatest thing on earth. It's kind of a puff piece, but in a very clever way. Times are changing. The monarch actually has to do stuff now. And this monarch, Colin Firth's character, the king, has a stutter, and so the public are gonna see them as weak. It's one of those, like, in history, everything is coming to like one point, and the movie sets up all those dominoes perfectly. The pressure of his old family, the pressure of World War II, the pressure of his stutter, the pressure of him learning how to be himself and like overcome what he's grown up in. And then the whole comparison that Adolf Hitler is this great orator that the people look up to and rally behind. And Colin Firth is just this royal sitting in his palace watching the TV like, man, he's really good at the thing I'm supposed to be good at. Really good stuff. This movie is a fun watch. It's a good history movie that doesn't take itself too seriously. It has fun with the camera work and the characters. And I think the friendship between the two main characters is very believable and honest. And when it needs to be emotional, it is. And when it needs to be uplifting and not like inspiring because he's like a king, but heartfelt. It knows how to play all of those punches really well. It does it very efficiently in critiquing royal high society in a very turbulent period of modern history. This is as Oscar bait as you can get on paper, but the way they execute it is very refreshing. Next up is 2011's The Artist. I would say this is the Best Picture winner that the least amount of people have seen. It is a black and white, silent film about the silent era of Hollywood, like studio Hollywood in the 20s, following this great silent star as sound talkies become popular. You've seen this before. It's Sunset Boulevard, it's Singing in the Rain, it's even Babylon. But this film is trying to recreate what made the silent film so engaging. And I think it's very successful. It feels like it came right out of the 1920s. Not recognizable faces, and then they're wearing the flapper dresses and they're doing the dance moves and all that stuff. It's really good, technically. It's like a little experiment. The problem is that experiment accidentally shows too much. There's a dream sequence that the Silent Star has where there is sound. It suddenly becomes a Twilight Zone horror sequence where he can't understand what is happening, and it's so loud and deafening, his ears are like bleeding, and he can't scream because he has no voice. He's chosen not to have a voice. He witnesses a world of sound that is like encircling him, and he can't catch up, he can't join it, and so it's like beating down on him. Really cool sequence. And then he wakes up, and then we're just in a silent movie for the rest of the film again. Why do that? Why did you do that? Why did you show me a way cooler movie and then return back to the experiment that you just proved could be something more? I had fun watching the movie. It is very forgettable. Like, it doesn't have sticking power. And that's like the invisible magic trick of movies, that you can't pinpoint what it needs to have sticking power. It's telling the same story that other films with sticking power have told, and it says, well, let's do it in a way more authentic way. On paper, that sounds like it would be the best one out of all of them. And then once the credits roll, you're like, okay, cool, let's watch Stranger Things. It's a style over substance movie, yes, but it leaves you so quickly, and I don't know why. Next up is Argo from 2012. Yeah, this did not hold up on rewatch. This movie doesn't have like a feel to it. Like, it takes place in the 70s, and the cars are right, and the clothing is right, and there's a lot of good use of archival footage and like shot recreations of photos taking place during the conflict, but it doesn't feel like it's in the 70s. There's too much, I don't know, hope? I don't know. The 70s were not a good time in terms of these conflicts and stuff, and this movie is so happy and celebratory. It starts with a weird comic book movie opening of like the storyboards, because that's kind of what the movie's about, making a movie that doesn't exist. So it's doing the sci-fi storyboards to explain that the US overthrew the leaders of another sovereign nation for capital gain, oil money, and to prevent socialism and communism. So they appointed a US-friendly dictator that tortured people for a long time. It's telling that in a comic book way. And I'm not talking Star Wars, I'm talking like, it's weird pictures of like people being strung up, and then it goes to like comic books. It feels in poor taste. It's trying to marry the two sides of the film together at the very beginning, which is smart. It feels weird. Like, this movie is about a coup in Iran, that the people are taking back their country from a leader that we appointed, and he was a terrible person. So, not a good look for the US. What does the movie focus on? A CIA agent succeeding in a military operation, an extraction, and coming home to his wife, who, they're not like divorced, but you know what I mean? Like, they're coming back together and hugging her in front of an American flag. No. What is this? It's so isn't America great, even though the conflict was started by us. And the movie kind of wants to sweep that under the rug by the end, even though it directly tells you that it's us that's the problem at the beginning. The strongest part, the script is it's a good script. The makeup and hairstyling, great job. Like, visually, the actors look the part. It's the movie itself that doesn't want to be in the period that it's recreating. And I think that was a big mistake. This next movie came out in 2013, but it has the number 12 in it. 12 Years a Slave, a Steve McQueen movie about a free and educated black man up in New York that gets kidnapped and then is sold into slavery for 12 years, based on a real story. It's very critical of the antebellum South. It doesn't villainize it. It looks at it in a very objective, voyeuristic, detached way. It's not that the slave owners are evil, mustache twirly. It's that they see everything around them as their property. Not just the black people they have enslaved, but like their wives are also their property. Everything is a business transaction, and everything is just to pay off debt because they're farmers. If their yield is down, well, they have to give 7 of their labor to the next plantation over because, oh, I'm in debt with him, so you guys have to work with him now. And he's way worse than me. It's a really good movie to watch in class. It explores every angle of people are property. It explores every side of it. It's a Plan B movie. So that company is led by Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt has his own production company. He sees scripts that he thinks should be made into movies, and he gives them money. So it's a Brad Pitt movie. Out of nowhere, Brad Pitt shows up as this Canadian, I'm guessing, Quaker at Michael Fassbender's plantation. And he's Jesus. He's playing Jesus, and it kind of breaks the movie. Every other white actor in this movie is playing a very unflinchingly honest portrayal of what happened at that time. Michael Fassbender, Paul Dano, Benedict Cumberbatch is kind of playing a little bit in the middle in an interesting way. Paul Giamatti. They're all playing the part. And then Brad Pitt shows up, and he's so saintly, so white saviory. This movie has spent its entire time telling you there's no easy way out. There's no happy way out. You will die here. And then Brad Pitt waltzes in. He's like, I paid for this movie. I get to play the hero. I don't like it. I don't like it. It honestly does detract the movie a lot. The ending feels unbelievable. Well, he has to escape. Because the true story, we have to show him escaping so the audience can leave happy. Because that is kind of what you have to figure out with this kind of historical Oscar bait movies is, well, we don't want the audience to feel bad about themselves. So we need to give them a bone. And that's Brad Pitt. 12 Years a Slave was the first Best Picture winner to be focused on a black character and not like a white person looking at a black character or like a black character helping out a white person. This is the first Best Picture winner where it's like, this is about slavery. We were following a man that was free and educated that became a slave. We were focusing on his story. We're not focusing on the shopkeeper that liked him back in New York. We're not focusing on Michael Fassbender having a change of heart. No, we're focusing on this guy. So yes, it should be celebrated for that. It's kind of awkward that it's the first Best Picture winner movie to really do that, but hooray, we got there eventually. And then the year later is the controversial Oscars So White year. It's a really flip-flop. On one side of the coin, success. The other is, wow, this is a bad look. It's mostly with the actors thing, but also very poetic that a movie where all the actors that are nominated are white. What's the movie that wins? The movie about acting. Birdman. And it's all white people. The punchline writes itself. But I like the movie. It's a good movie. I will say, in terms of influence on the industry, Birdman from 2014 has more of a legacy than 12 Years a Slave does. Mostly because any kind of potential legacy 12 Years a Slave would have had, Get Out kind of took it and made it its own. But Birdman, if you've seen Kingsman, if you've seen 1917, this whole, oh, we're gonna do one long take, but it's really secretly hidden takes throughout Birdman. And Birdman, it's impressive because this was not a big budget movie. I think it was like 20 million or something. And every movie that's recreating that style is like in the hundreds of millions. So it's fun to have a mouse break the wheel of the system and then the lion's like, oh, I'll do that. You know, that kind of thing. Rags to riches. The rags show the riches how to get it done. But that's really all people see in this movie. And I think it is saying something interesting. People say it's just a lot of people yelling in rooms. And I agree. But I do think it has something to say about ego. Because you have the superhero actor that Michael Keaton is playing as, kind of a self-insert, him trying to reignite his career and it worked. And then the theater critic who honestly is a really rude woman for like no reason. And she's got her little pet theater actor that no one cares about, but he's good on stage. So she's like a New York journalist, so she's like, he's worth mentioning. You, Michael Keaton, are not. There's like different stances of like, what is art? Is a superhero movie art? That's kind of one of the bigger questions this movie is saying, and it's saying no, even though it's saying like the people love it, so wouldn't that be art kind of thing. Is art criticism art? Is theater acting art when you're actually drunk on set or you actually try to have sex with your actress? Like, you're not acting, you're just doing the thing that the script is telling you to do? Or is it good that an actor is only himself when he's on the stage, and as soon as he's off the stage, that's when he's faking it? There's a lot of cool things that it's like showing about actors. I think it's saying something about ego. Art can be in many forms, but it's ego that really poisons it. Like that theater critic, at this point she's not a critic. She looks at Keaton and she's like, I will destroy your play. She hasn't even seen it. Her ego has gotten the best of her. Edward Norton, he thinks he's better than everybody, but also that's like a facade he puts up. And Michael Keaton does see himself as an artist because he's sacrificing everything. But he has that ego that because I've burned all of my bridges, I deserve a new bridge. They all have these egos that kind of drive them forward and lead them to success, but they are the poison that prevent them from making good art. Edward Norton's character fully believes that every rehearsal is so good because they do something spontaneous, but he's breaking the set, he's making the audience laugh, he's disrupting the whole thing, and he sees that as art, when really he's just the worst co-star that you ever want. Meanwhile, Emma Stone's character is going through this existentialism subplot. She's kind of representing like the aftershock of Michael Keaton just not being there as a father. And all he cares about is being remembered and like having a legacy. Even though she's his legacy, he doesn't care about her at all. It's a fun movie where weird shit is happening. And there's so much weird shit happening that I'm glad it won in a very controversial year. It is reinventing the wheel. It is doing things that no other Best Picture winner had the guts to do, because there was not a chance this movie would have won in any year prior. But now we're in the 2010s. The Best Picture is different now. The blueprint isn't gonna work every time. And this movie lights the blueprint on fire. Next movie is Spotlight from 2015, and after 8 years of Catholic school, this movie is a hard watch. I've seen it, I think 3, maybe 4 times, and it gets harder to watch every time, which is a compliment to the movie. I think it's very effective in what it is doing, especially that last scene is a really powerful last scene. And the way they film the streets of Boston, and that there's always a church in sight, looming over the victims. They can't escape it because they live in this city. I think the movie is actually saying something very powerful. It takes a village to like build someone up, but it takes a village to destroy someone. Everyone in power, let them get away with it. And the fact that that is a universal thing. It's happened all over the world. At this point, it's not shocking, but it still hurts. It hurts. And I think the movie amplifies that as best as it can. There are some moments like Ruffalo's speech, they knew and they let it happen, that people kind of critique as being too much. You're pushing it a little too far. You're telling me even instead of showing me kind of thing. It's too much for this film, but I do think the audience kind of needs some relief. Like, thank you, Mark Ruffalo, for being angry for me. I think it's what they were trying to do, but it's a very low-key journalism movie that it kind of conflicts with the tone of what the rest of the movie is doing. Because like no one's lives are at stake. Unlike other journalism movies where, oh no, he's got a gun, or spies and espionage. This one's very low-key, and that's kind of hard to keep that energy building. But I think this movie figures it out for the most part. This movie is one of the saddest endings and end credits I've ever seen. I would compare it to Wind River when it gives like a statistic and you're just kind of sitting there like, oh my gosh. And the credits are just silent, showing you the legacy of what the movie is talking about and that it's still happening.
Moonlight, Best Picture.
The best way I can describe this movie is like a hangout movie, but depressing. The way the camera just kind of floats through time, especially part one. Very floating camera work. Mahershala Ali, fantastic in this movie. He has so little screen time, but his presence lingers through the whole movie. You feel his work till the very end, even though he's not in it that much. The movie is doing a lot of really interesting and vulnerable things, but I think it's his performance that makes it so timeless. It's some weird sort of like vulnerability and joy, but then the reality of he is a drug dealer trying to do something right, even though the things that he does wrong have put this kid in the situation that he's trying to help him out of. He's trying to be a good man, but the only way he can be a man and the only way he could survive in this world is to not be a good person. So when he tries, it's like too little too late. Even though we still feel it, that little bit goes a long way for Chiron. And I think the movie is trying to appreciate that in the weird, conflicting way that it exists. It's trying to appreciate it. And I think that's a very earnest way of examining these characters in this world. This movie did kind of start that A24 look, the neon colors, the way the blue looks, like the selective color palette, very saturated colors, and where they place the camera, smaller productions, like we're gonna stick to the camera to the car door, like that kind of stuff. But it's like very personal, and we're gonna get as close to the characters as possible with either the saturated selective color palette or with like the neon backlighting that feels not ethereal, but like unnatural, supernatural kind of thing. At least that's what I think the A24 look is to a certain extent, like Uncut Gems, Good Time, the Safdie's movies, this, Bodies, 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 like the non-horror A24 movies, Spring Breakers, you can tell what an A24 production is. Like Euphoria would not look like what it looks like without Moonlight. You have to talk about Moonlight with La La Land. You have to compare them because of the stupid envelope thing. These movies are doing such different things, and they are both amazingly well-made movies that both deserve that award. I think it was smart on the Academy to pick Moonlight because of previous events in this decade, but also just the movie is tackling a very new subject matter in art, and that is masculinity versus like toxic masculinity. The way that men can be strong by being vulnerable. You don't get a lot of that in cinema. You get Braveheart, you get Saving Private Ryan, you get that shit. This movie's doing something very new. So this movie deserves the award for that. I used to be the guy where it's like, ooh, La La Land should have won it. Now that I rewatch Moonlight, it's doing a lot of stuff. It deserves it. So the year after, 2017, we have Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water. This is actually probably the only Best Picture winner I have picked correctly, and that's luck. That is not skill. This movie is so weird. There's no way it could have won, and then it did. If you were to ask me how to define movie magic, I would show you this movie. The production design is baffling. Every color, every prop, every stain on the wall it feels so sculpted to Del Toro's vision. The romance feels so personal to him that I think that's its greatest strength. All the interviews of him talking about how he fell in love with Creature from the Black Lagoon and how he wanted to recreate it where the creature had a happy ending. It's like the behind the scenes of this movie is better than the movie itself, and that's kind of the case for every Del Toro movie because his strength is the production design. The fish suit in this is unbelievable. I still can't even wrap my head around it. It blinks, it works underwater, it glows different patterns underneath the scales, it sheds. It has personality. Like, it's flexible in that it can swim and do sign language believably and dance. There's a dance number in this that does what the artist is doing better in less time. It's unbelievable seeing Del Toro, a master at work. It's the design, it's the production, it's the scope and the scale and the feeling of this movie that makes it what it is.
This make up for Do the Right Thing not winning the Oscar for you right now?
I'm snake bit. I mean, every time somebody's driving somebody, I lose. Oh, I thought it was courtside at the Garden. The ref made a bad call. Whoa.
Yeah, Black Klansman should have won over this. I talked about Crash last decade. Brokeback Mountain easily should have won, but the Academy was too scared to nominate it. I think the same with Black Klansman. The Academy was way too scared to nominate Black Klansman because Spike Lee was just saying some shit very loudly in a very rough part of history with racism and stuff. Green Book is the palatable version of Black Klansman that you can show in a middle school. 12 Years a Slave, you can really only show senior year, if you trust your students kind of thing. Green Book, you can show a 10-year-old. No, maybe not that, but it's very, the best word I can describe is toothless. It's not sticking its neck out. It's telling the story in the safest way. Now, people destroy this movie for that. I honestly think, in terms of Hollywood, this movie is really well made. Like, on technical aspects and paper, pacing, script, characters. Not really the look. The color grading is actually kind of gross, and I don't know why. But other than that, I think it's a very well-made movie. But if you are arguing that movies are art, which the Academy is, art is political because art is making something that says something. The rest of these movies are saying things. Like, even Argo is saying things about American history. Green Book isn't saying anything. Well, it's not saying anything new, that's for sure. It's Driving Miss Daisy, it's Rain Man, it's a buddy road trip movie. It's not a movie about racism. It exists in a story and life events about racism, but the movie itself is a road trip movie where the two main guys butt heads until they find common ground. It just so happens that they're butting heads over their race, their ethnicities. It's the most harmless movie about racism that I've ever seen. Kind of impressive that it speeds by every issue as fast as possible. Dr. Shirley is gay ? That's one scene in the movie, and then it's referenced a little bit later, and never again. Movie, you are existing in this world. You are telling these people's stories. Tell it like you mean it, because you're really shying away from everything right now. If Black Klansman were a tequila shot, this would be a milkshake. It goes down so smooth, you forget that you had it. So of course the Academy picks this over Spike Lee's Black Klansman. Black Klansman is so much a better movie, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. Yes, this movie is sort of a Christmas movie. I think it's very well made until the last shot. I don't know if they lost it. I don't know if they forgot to film it. They probably didn't forget to film it, but they cut it off. If it's a Christmas movie and he comes over for dinner, have him sit at the table. Toy Story. Watch Toy Story. What happens? The buddies get together, they hug it out, everyone's surrounded with each other, happy holidays, they're having a good time. The camera is tracking away, and it goes through a window or something, and we see everyone at the table, happy family, snow out the window. That's a Christmas movie. That's how you end a Christmas movie. How does this movie end? They end at the hug. You don't end at the hug with a Christmas movie. You show everyone hugging, not just two people hugging. What the heck? They got rid of the final shot in the movie. The movie the credits come out of nowhere. The one punch in the movie is the credits. It makes no sense. Our last movie is Parasite. Whoa. Very different from, well, I guess every Best Picture winner, because it's the only foreign film to win Best Picture. It won Director, It won foreign language film, or however they label it that year. And it won Best Picture. 2019 was the best year of movies that I've ever lived through. It's an amazing year. I'm still a little salty that only one movie won at the Oscars. That's the case every year. There are 2 or 3 movies that take all the awards. It pisses me off every year. This movie, it doesn't deserve my frustration because it's amazing and flawless, but I'm still a little salty. It didn't share the gold with everyone else. It kind of hogged it all for itself. That's not its fault. That's the Academy. The Academy pisses me off sometimes. If you have not seen Parasite, because it's not in English, stop. Just go watch it. It's on Max right now. It's worth your time. It's so good. This is the second time I watched it. I watched it with my family last night. All 3 of them, they had like their reactions that I had the first time at the same moment. It's insane to have a movie so good. Every audience member has the oh shit moment at every point at the same time. I don't even know how you do that. That is masterful. And Bong Joon-ho is like the best of the best right now. Out of all of these movies, Parasite is the one that you have to watch. Wow. Hey, I actually finished the drink this time. Those were the 2010s. The ones that I saw for the first time were 12 Years a Slave, Green Book, and The Artist. I mean, I liked them, but they all were disappointing. I don't want to say 12 Years a Slave was disappointing, but it didn't meet the hype that everyone has given it. So here's my list of all the movies. Yeah, it was fun rewatching everything after decades of seeing new movies. It's kind of fun to be like, I know what I'm about to walk into. It's relaxing. It's not what movies are supposed to be. The Best Picture winner should not be a comfort watch. It should be doing new things. It should be trying stuff out. It should be telling something that's worth telling. Like, it's supposed to hold a mirror up to your face, or it's supposed to strip a mask off of someone you trust, like that kind of thing. It's supposed to be bold. And if that means a small movie like Moonlight, absolutely. Next video is gonna be the end of this challenge. There'll be 4 movies, and then I'll do a recap of the whole thing, and I'll try to rank all the decades. There is some recency bias, I'm gonna be honest. If you are looking at the scores, the way filmmaking has changed is the style that I grew up with and the style that I want to recreate. And a lot of the Best Picture winners have crafted that style. So that's why I like those movies more. I'm sorry, 1980s. Not my cup of tea. Thank you guys for sticking through to the end. I'll see you at the end of the year. Happy holidays.